talked a bit about in this written interview we did how you already had, since you were a child, thoughts about zoos and the way you felt about that, and some of that came to play that during your time at SeaWorld thoughts you were having. Could you expound a little bit on that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think I always, at a very, even from a very young age, I always had this love of animals. There's no doubt about that, and I had a desire to see them. And I was always that kind of kid that would want to go to a zoo whenever we had the opportunity, and I only went a couple of times. And every time that I did, I just found myself depressed. I would look at these animals and it would just bring tears to my eyes. It was really a sad thing. And so I had no memory of ever going to a SeaWorld park when I was a kid. But I do know that once I started working there, it was kind of funny because, you know, my family would contact me like, what are you working at SeaWorld for? Like, you hate zoos. Like, you can't even go to a zoo without crying. And I never equated them. But as I was there for a longer period of time and saw the similar kinds of things, it definitely touched me in the same way over time.
Definitely, which sort of leads us to our next question, which is, what are some of the things that, what led you to start believing that, wow, there's some problematic issues with captivity? What are some of your experiences with, you know, the suffering of the whales and dolphins, or things that stand out in your mind as emotional experiences for you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have a few things that stand out when I think back to, you know, how I was feeling at the time working there, the kinds of things I would leave at the end of the day and kind of be questioning, that kind of thing, or that would kind of touch me in a way that I would want to talk to my friends or family after I left from a day of working there. And some of them are, they were really challenging things just to watch. So Jeff talked a little bit about Gudrun at Shamu Stadium at Kanduke. Well, to me, Kanduke was one of the saddest things that you could imagine. This massive male whale being in this tiny space, and he was so constantly just tortured. He and Jeff talked about this as well, that we were contributing to that in even a bigger way than simply having him there. And those were the things like Jeff talked about, putting him in positions where he was beat up by the females. I mean, this happens frequently, right? So we had all the females in the pool, just like in current times with Tilikum probably being beat up. I've never worked with Tilikum, so my experience with the adult male whale was with Kanduke. So he's beat up by the females, and then you have periods of time, just like Jeff had talked about earlier, where that was used punitively against him, the fact that the females would aggress against him. So if Kanduke would not leave the show pool at the end of the pool and go back into the pool they wanted him to be in, well, they would open up the gates and the girls would rush in and just beat the crap out of them. So you had this combination of him either constantly being beaten up by the girls or beating himself up when he's left alone. So that was always very, very hard. Too young of an age, and they've not had a model of good family structures and mothering that give birth and reject their babies. So I just feel like in captivity, if you're unlucky enough to be an orca in captivity and you're a female, your two options are to give birth, be bonded with your baby and have it ripped away from you, or to get pregnant, give birth, and have no idea what to do with that baby and reject your calf. I mean, those are the two scenarios that are going to happen with mothers who are giving birth in captivity.
Right.
And they're both horrible.
Right, and like you were saying that SeaWorld and other marine parks seem to have a history with breeding females at a very young age. That would be abnormal in the wild as well, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we know that they're breeding them as young, attempting to breed them as young as 4 or 5 years old. And we just learned we have another pregnant, or they have another another pregnant female in California, right? Who's only 9 years old.
And so I I definitely think this would play into the next question, but what are some of the things that you think that SeaWorld tries to hide from the general public?
Oh, I definitely think that they've come out and said we do not separate our mothers from their calves. And I think right there is certainly there's a level of semantics and not necessarily lying, but misleading the public with a statement like that. It is true. I don't think that they would remove a nursing calf from its mother, aside from for a short period of time to put them in another pool. But that just shows you how screwed up their notion of what's natural for orcas to begin with is, because they're not recognizing that the learning that goes on, just because an animal is weaned doesn't mean that they're mature.
Just talk a little bit about, just kind of expounding on that, sort of, is just like the differences between captivity and the wild, their lives in a captive environment versus in the wild. Just some of the more obvious things that come to your mind immediately that you feel are important.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, saying that they're swimming in straight lines is one thing. So, you know, in captivity, they're swimming in circles all day long in a small space that is whatever percentage of the normal space they would naturally, what is it, point?
Well, it's, I don't know, it's 1/10,000?
1/10,000 of the space that they would typically have out in the wild. But I've seen transients feeding on marine mammals, and you know, in captivity, what you're going to see is like the transient we had do, having to eat dead fish. Right? The difference between watching a group of animals do what they naturally do to feed, and watching them in captivity, there's just no comparison. It's a completely artificial, unnatural, barren, blue environment designed for the humans that are going there, not designed to meet the needs of the animals that are there. And you see them out in nature, and it's just
Yeah.
Can you say that again? Repeat that, please.
It definitely is a